All right.
Thought we were already live
Nope.
on our audio.
We're there.
So that's when I told my wife, I'm like, I don't care if there's beer. I'm going to Bible study.
Oh, who's reading what?
Every week
The
you have to
usual.
go through that.
Same thing.
Yeah, except I get the beginning of
Who's reading what?
What?
Nothing.
What?
it. Welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio, coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City, Texas. You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with all your friends.
In this episode, we're going to revisit two of our continuing segments with Yeast-o-Rama and Malt-o-Rama, and also talk about a few beers. In Yeast-o-Rama, we're going to talk about 3 of the yeasts we have experience with for NEIPAs, because that's all anyone is talking about, and then talk about a couple of dry lager yeasts. Then in Malt-o-Rama, we're going to be going over some of the variety of rye malt and sampling a few rye beers brought back from a recent trip to Tennessee. Plus, Chris brought in his Bluebonnet beers, and we have Mikey back in the studio for the first time in a while, so we'll see what they have for us. Enjoy the show.
Before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/ComeandBrewItRadio, we have a variety of options for you to help them keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. And starting soon at the end of each month, we'll be doing a monthly product giveaway for all of our $5, $10, and $20 patrons. I'm Chris.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Greg.
I'm Mikey B.
And I'm Stubby.
Yay!
Yay.
Mikey is
Yay.
back.
What
Mikey is
up?
back.
It just feels better in the studio, you know?
We have somebody else we can pick on.
I feel so special.
It's like an old comfortable jacket that you put on, you know?
What's up with this camera? It's like upside down.
That one may have been installed incorrectly.
Which one?
This one?
It's Greg's camera is like upside down.
No, Greg is upside down.
Are you in the credits of the Fresh Prince?
Yeah.
Your life got straight flipped upside down?
Deep
Whoa.
cut, bro. Deep cut.
Deep cut.
Look at this lovely
Am I
footage
showing my
here, man.
age?
But
Yeah,
no,
why'd you switch to that camera when...
I don't know, man.
Oh, man. I'm drinking so much
You're
already.
gonna make me
man.
vomit.
Oh!
So
Yikes.
it's we're getting a little bit of a late start here. Not that that's unusual, but
Yeah,
we have
don't.
already begun.
We have a new producer, and he's already left on us.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
for the night, anyway.
Just for the night.
Very
So
busy
when
man.
I'm running this crap, it's slow as shit. Sorry.
Now, was he
So
he
it's all
lured away
Stubby's
by,
fault if,
Sheriff's live, or...
I don't know what he's doing. Probably some Weird Al Yankovic deal or something.
He's probably recording some Beatles
Boobles.
themed booby music. Yeah, which is great. I encourage that behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you ever
Sure.
you have a chance, go and look up his his band called the Boobles,
The Boobles, yeah.
and it's kind of a neat thing. It's like what they do. They do all Beatles covers, but they make it about boobs.
yeah. Yeah.
And they do a portion of the proceeds, I think, from their album sales to breast cancer awareness. So.
What's
Kind of a cool
interesting
thing.
is that when you Google that, you'll also get a bunch of random footage of Eric just standing in front of a microphone in some place, just singing unaccompanied Boobles songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I thought that's kind of odd. What's he doing there? But
Oh, that's him too, huh?
yeah. But the best one, which you have to look up, is
YouTube.
Moo Moo Cow.
Yeah, Moo Moo Cow.
And it's what is it? Is it by Sea Monkey? Go
Sea
to
Monkey
YouTube,
Music, yeah.
Sea Monkey Music. Look up Moo Moo Cow. That's a work of art. I've watched that thing like 10 times, and it's great.
It is funny.
It's great.
When you're in the shop after the podcast late at night.
That has happened once,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. But mostly I'm showing it to other people. You have to check this out. Him climbing out of that tub of milk in a Speedo or whatever. Oh, dude, you have to go watch it. It's
Yeah,
great.
it is great.
I'm afraid.
So we've got a lot of things to get into tonight. We've got malt, we've got yeast, we've got a little bit more talk about the Bluebonnet beers and judging and that kind of thing. We're going to taste a couple of Chris's beers and kind of look over the score sheets that he got back, which for the most part I looked them over and I thought, just as score sheets go in terms of how they're filled out, I thought they weren't bad for the most part, with one notable exception. And then you know, we've got some of the new segments we've been doing lately, so we got a lot to go over tonight. I think it's probably going to be the best show we've ever done. Right?
Probably.
Aren't they all?
And can I add a quick
Every
comment
one of
here
them.
that it was put into the feed before we got started? It says it's from Michael Murphy.
Oh, what's
Allen
up, Michael?
Murphy.
So we got a lot to go over tonight. I think it's
hey.
Yay!
First
Second
glitch.
It says, shout out to whoever suggested using a brew in a bag as a filter in their mash tun. Brewed last night using Fruit Loops, and cleanup was so easy, and I hit my numbers. And
We're
I
gonna
think
ignore that
was
Fruit Loops
Brandon.
comment.
So that's something I started doing recently. I had brewed with a guy one time that, and he was one of the horsemen of the Hopocalypse. It's one of our local clubs here. Great group of guys. And this guy, instead of putting a false bottom or a manifold in his cooler mash tun, he was just putting a brewing bag in there and doing that. And I thought, man, that's genius. And it worked really well, and the cleanup was easy and all that stuff. And so I've added that into my mash tun just as an extra filter. And when I'm brewing by myself, it's tough to pick up my 16-gallon mash tun full of wet grain and carry it somewhere. It's much easier to pull this bag out and let it sit and the liquid drain out, and then I can do whatever I want with the grain. And it's worked really well. I like it a lot. It had not occurred to me that for something like Fruit Loops, which
Yeah.
probably turned into mush in the mash. You have a mush mash that it
Mush mash?
a mush mash, yeah. That it would probably help greatly for something like that and keep it from gumming everything up. So, that's just another one of those things where we're kind of getting into some hybrid technology with some of the new purpose-built equipment that we didn't used to have before, which I think is pretty cool. So I recommend giving that a try. I've been really happy with mine. I think it was, $12 for that brewing bag, and I've been really happy with it.
Something like that.
And
Something like that.
They're good
Joseph-
for hop editions too.
Joseph, yes, the Taco Hall is an extract and a all grain kit. So yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I realized that today when I looked at that blog post. When you click on it, it only goes to the all grain.
There are multiple
Okay.
links.
Oh,
in
is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah. But anyhow,
Yeah, it's there.
Pretty much any kit that you
I like
guys
them
make
both.
is available as all grain or extract,
There's
right?
there's a handful
Yeah.
that there's just a handful that are extra or all grain only, and it's just the nature of that kit.
Yeah, okay.
Like the spelt
Smoke
saison,
right.
one or two others. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say if we have 100 kits, 95 of them are
Right.
extract and all grain.
And they'll both be listed on the site.
All right,
So-
so let's get into recent happenings here. I don't know. I'm going to skip to number 2 here. Number 2 is
worries.
Green Flash Brewing closing.
Yeah, for closure.
Well, foreclosure, yeah.
I think we saw that coming, didn't we?
Yeah,
I mean, when they pulled out of 15 states, I mean,
yeah. Well, then their head brewer quit, and all that stuff. And
the
this is
writing was on the wall.
another example of what we saw with Smutty Nose, and we talked about that, and that it wasn't that the business climate was bad. It wasn't that they weren't putting out a good product. It wasn't that their product wasn't popular. It was that they expanded beyond what they could handle. And again, I'll bring it up. I see it a lot of times in my business where you have a couple years where your growth is 20-25%, and in craft brew you had several years where it was in those digits, and people go into debt based on those numbers. And I see it with
Right.
salesmen in my industry all the time. They go buy a big house because they've had a few great years, and then the bottom drops out of something,
Right.
and they're screwed. And that's what happened here, unfortunately, because this is an iconic brewery as far as I'm
Right.
concerned.
Right.
And to me, their beers have gotten better over the years.
They really
Yeah.
have, yeah.
They've definitely
Because at one time, man, I could not drink it. It was just so damn bitter.
Well, it was a sign of the times, It was
Yeah.
that's what those beers were back then. The West Coast IPAs were real high bitter, and it was the IBU race that everybody was in. They had one called Palate Wrecker.
It was
You know?
oniony. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I actually really liked that beer.
Well, it grew on you, but it was intense.
but
right
it
off.
certainly lived up to its name, that's for sure. And they really made some great beers, I thought, and I'm really just saddened to see this because it's just a case. They opened up a location in Virginia, is that right? They opened up another big brewery in Virginia, if I remember correctly, and that's kind of what overextended them.
Right.
And that's it's a case of a business that's healthy, that makes a good product that people like, but still fails just because.
Well, it's not a small brewery that got beat out by competition. That's what's hard on this one.
Yeah.
And like Smutty Nose, these are well established breweries it's sad to see them go.
Yeah.
Which these are the guys that are going to outlay that kind of money into the situations to try to make a larger investment in all these properties. And then the problem is that it turns around and they got bit by it just because it changes so fast in the last 5 years, with so many more breweries and
Well,
whatnot.
and I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but I have a feeling we're going to see in Texas, you're going to see the guys that opened 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the ones that are, I would say, are big regional breweries. They're the guys that are having a tough time because the guys in that are local, especially now since the laws have changed, it's the little guys that really depend on their tap rooms to keep them sustainable. And they're smaller. Whereas the bigger regional breweries, when they got started here in Texas, they didn't have that option for a tap room.
Right. Yeah.
So what they depended largely was upon their distribution. So,
and that has become
it's
incredibly difficult. I mean, it was already difficult before.
Right.
Now it's incredibly difficult, and you're right. It's if you have the tap, if your business was built around your tap room and your local business, you have a much better foothold or foundation to rest on than if you're constantly having to battle for tap
Shelf
space.
space.
Yeah. Shelf space. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things that I thought was crazy is, and you guys have probably saw that the guys that for you guys that are not in Texas, one of the weird things is we had a weird corny label law, and basically it was anything under 5% had to be labeled as beer. Anything over that had to be either labeled as malt liquor or
a lager.
or ale.
Ale. No, they couldn't. Yeah, they couldn't say
Ale?
lager. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that did is that kept a lot of competition out. So we were kind of behind the times, I guess, when
we had beers that we got here
Yeah.
that had a note on the label that said ale in Texas.
right.
Because they had to make special labels just to be able to sell here. Because you had to call your beer something that was incorrect.
Right. Even if it was a lager that was over 5%, you had to call it an ale.
Yeah, it'd be like if you were selling a car and you had to call it a truck. That's
Right.
exactly what people
Yeah.
had to do, and so
It
they
holds
just
more
stayed
than
out.
5 gallons of.
Well, that was that big law change that finally happened, that you could have any alcohol percentage you want. You just had to put it on the label.
Yeah.
Just the ABV, and you could actually
And you
call
could
your beer
call it-
exactly what it is, and that's a small change, if any change, for most of the labels.
Yeah, but what happened was, however, is that everybody was celebrating this change, but I think for the small part, it actually was detrimental to the development of a lot of craft breweries here in Texas, because the guys that are in Michigan and Chicago and the West Coast, they already had breweries 15, 20 years. But here's what I'm saying is that as soon as that label law changed, what happened here in Texas? We got
Overloaded.
an influx of all these large breweries like Founders and Bell's and all of the West Coast stuff. We got a really good selection before, but we really got a great selection now, and I think that just adds fuel to the fire.
Well, it makes it a more competitive marketplace, but I'm sorry, if you're running an independent business, you don't get to complain about it being too competitive. That's just
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying that
competition is the status quo.
I get it. I'm just saying that whereas the scene was way advanced 5 or 10 years before in these other places before than it was here in Texas. So
yeah, well,
they
but-
didn't
and I
they
think
didn't
what
have
it-
the same time to develop like these guys in Michigan and California.
Well,
or
what it
Colorado, for
did
that
though
matter.
was it let a lot of mediocre guys just kind of rest on the fact that they were in a market that wasn't competitive because of a stupid law. And now,
Right.
now if you're going to be a successful brewery here, you've got to really bring your A game. And we're seeing,
agree with that, too.
And we're seeing, I think, some breweries that only have the B game are kind of falling by the wayside. And not that I wish for anybody's business to fail or anything, because I know how hard these guys work and all that, but that's the reality of the world, is if you want to succeed, you've got to be good. And we're just, all of a sudden now we have this reality that we didn't have before. I'm not going to bemoan that just because some people that were putting out mediocre beer aren't going to do as well anymore. So I don't know. This is one too where we're going to see Green Flash. The brand is still going to be around. Someone's buying the brand,
Right.
So you're still going to be able to buy Green Flash beer.
I think that's going to become really common. Actually,
no, I agree with you. Yeah, I think it will.
I mean, it happened in the '90s too.
I was going to say that was the end of that craft beer boom in the '90s. That's exactly what happened. Breweries went out of business because they just couldn't make it, and somebody else bought their brand names.
Well, that's standard operating procedure in the business world. I mean, brand names are just passed around like they're nothing. To some extent, brands don't mean a whole lot in a lot of different industries unless they're independently owned.
Newsflash.
Right.
Lone Star and PBR are not brewed by those people anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
The National Beer of Texas, not brewed here.
It's brewed in Fort Worth, but
Well.
it's brewed by Miller Coors.
Right.
That's owned by a South African company. So, there you go.
So you'll still see Green Flash around. Who knows who will brew it? Who knows if it'll be the same or if it'll be any good or whatever. But I personally, I'm going to mourn the passing of an icon because I thought
Probably
they
be
were
the
just
same, but just there won't be any more innovation.
Well, I
from
think
the
it
same
depends on
people.
who gets their hands on it.
Yeah.
Stubby, do you know the year that label law got changed?
Man, that was 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah,
I think it was longer.
I think it was
than
like
that.
5 to 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think
Was
it
it
was like
really?
5 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, yeah,
So,
it's been a
This
while.
point-
Joseph,
that
we're
one?
not exactly sure, but I know it's been in the last probably 5 to 7 years.
It was
Probably
back
not
in
much longer.
1992.
Probably not much longer ago.
I
than
think
that.
you're right. I think it was between 5 and 7 years ago. So, all right. So the other recent news that we've got here was an article on genetically modified yeast creating hop flavors.
So you're coming back to it.
Yeah.
I think you wanted more time
Still
on
want
it.
to fondle it, don't you? That's what's happening.
Well, it's
here.
on the list to talk about.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to go with that first. It's a little more uncomfortable subject.
Yeah, something that's going to provoke more conversation.
Well,
and
this
we
has
need a
been
bigger
in-
time spot for it.
Right, and this has been in the news off and on for a little while. I mean, if you
Couple
go back and
months.
look at so it's been around. A lot of people have read it. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say more than the fact that there are now some modified yeast that produce some of the flavor components of hop character, like what was it, Centennial?
This particular article discusses. This was on NPR, and they spliced DNA from mint and basil plants into genes of brewing yeast. And they said, as it turns out, the engineered yeast strain consistently created the grapefruit-like flavors typical of the Cascade hop.
Cascade.
So to me, this is I'm going to file this one under answers to questions that nobody ever asked.
Okay.
It's a solution to a problem that doesn't
Did we-
exist.
Yeah.
If anybody will ever use this, it will be AB InBev, maybe making Sierra Nevada when they eventually buy them out. And
Now I know
this
why
is
you
something-
reserve your comment. You're
Well,
just
this is
waiting to put
something that I
out.
could see large mega breweries using in brewing the craft brands that they have
Right.
brought out. You know,
It's
just
got some-
because
Just cutting
just
costs.
because of economics.
Yeah.
Right. If the changes on a larger scale, like if they pursued this and there were more versions of this yeast that produced specific flavor ranges and things like that, and they were more ubiquitous as far as what you could anybody could get it. I could see a lot of people using these for various reasons to cut their cost on something that has to be grown in a field
There's
versus something
more
that they can
more
make
than
in a
likely,
lab.
though,
You know?
something like this is something that can be trademarked. And
Yeah.
So there's a brewery in California, Drake's Brewing Company. that
Drake's is a huge,
they're
iconic brewery up there.
He is in discussions about using the yeast. His plan is to make an IPA without Cascade hops.
Oh, Drake's!
Such
Come on,
disappointment.
man.
Yeah.
It could be amazing.
Well,
Well,
we'll find out one day.
And here's the
You
the
know
whole
what?
thing.
Their beer is already amazing.
But he says, I don't see this ever replacing hops. My sense is we'll be coloring in with the hop flavors.
So it's a
And-
way to get your beer as a headline.
Sure.
A lot like putting glitter in it.
But he said that it also says they're going to clearly market as brewed with genetically modified yeast,
Right.
yeah.
which I think is going to turn a lot of people off.
A lot of neckbeards aren't going to buy that beer.
Mhm.
You're going to scare off the whole neckbeard community.
Which might be good for the community as a whole, really.
Hey, what
I'm
you
not
know?
using neckbeard in a derogatory sense here. It's just a
I think that was racist.
commonality on that
I
one.
thought neckbeard was a derogatory term. I thought there wasn't a good way to use that.
It just means you have a
You know, one of the things, though, I would say, though, that is that I think when you think about that, I don't think there's any way it could possibly, take over hops. And the only reason I say that is one of the reasons you put it in there is for, antimicrobial properties.
You're right.
And stuff that actually helps you, store the beer. If it's just a flavor, it's not going to do all.
Well,
those
but
things.
here's the thing: is you could easily put an actual preservative in there.
Oh yeah, that's
Pasteurized
great.
and preservatives.
So so again, this is something that the big boys might.
But you have
might
to,
do.
you got to have something to offset the sugar. So you have to bitter it somehow.
yeah.
But
That's the-
who's to say
Well,
someone
the
doesn't
big
come
boys
up
are
with,
already using
Right.
hop extract for
right?
that.
I was going to say, who's to say someone doesn't come up with some form
Right.
like that? That we
So
only
your
do this.
yeast gives off your flavor. You have extract for bitterness, and chemical preservatives are dirt cheap compared to hops.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, and what's funny is I have a we sell to pro breweries, and one of the things that has come up is a lot of the guys are like, oh, hop oil, and they use it and they're not real impressed with it. And then the newest thing is the the lupulin powder and the what was it, the cryo hops, and I think those things are all things that can be utilized, but they're never going to replace them. And I think the feedback that I've gotten is that most people think, wow, they're too expensive for what I'm getting out of it, so I'm just going to go back to using regular hops.
well, I think there's some misconceptions about a lot of that thing too. And if you go on the internet and read about Pliny the Elder, for example, I know they use hop extract in that beer, but hop extract is just for bitterness. That's all it's there for.
They're just reducing the amount of material put in
Right.
the beer. as well,
They're
so.
reducing the vegetal material.
Now
Yeah.
you'll read things on the
say
internet.
that.
The general internet consensus is there's no way to get that many hops in a beer without using extract, which is absolutely ridiculous. You could. Because it's just bitterness. You
We
can
know
get
some people
alpha acid
locally that
hops
are
are
doing
like
it.
24%
Yeah.
alpha acid. It doesn't take that much of that to put bitterness in beer. So it's not
especially when you're getting these dumb hops now, they're like 20% alphas.
right.
You know?
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what some of those things are used for, and to me, again, I'll go back to I think it's the answer to a question no one asked. It doesn't solve any problem. It's a different way of getting to the same place, and the way we've been getting to that place up to this point works pretty damn good, in my opinion. I don't see a lot of shortfalls to it, with the exception of maybe, when you're talking about like New England IPAs, where you've got all of your hops are late additions, and it's a huge addition. So I could see where something like cryo hops or the hop hash or something like that,
Shortcuts.
just reducing the
Yeah.
amount of matter that's in there.
Yeah, well,
So you
and you
reduce
got
the
you
amount
got a
of loss you
you
have.
got a possibility of having some off flavors from all that organic
Right,
material,
right.
and that's one of the things you and I talked about, Brandon, quite a bit, was like the wet hops, and
Yeah.
that's the reason I get a terrible grassy
Yeah.
vegetal
That's like
flavor
a step
out of
in the
them.
wrong. It's a step backwards, really.
I just do not like it. I've tried it, and maybe I don't know what the hell I'm doing, or I'm not getting good wet hops, but that's just been my experience.
Well, my thing is, if you taste 10 beers and 2 of them are good, that's probably an indication that process just isn't worth doing.
There is a reason they dry them.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably about the ratio of wet hop beers that I've liked. Probably 20%.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. You mentioned that I've had pro beers that a lot of them you can find exactly what you're talking about, that you just don't appreciate that little background flavor character.
It's like
It's
grass,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
It's
like
too grassy.
weed, like you're
Too-
cutting the grass kind
The-
of.
Like
the
it's
one
too
I-
alive.
The one I always go back to is Mirror
Too much
Pond Pale
chlorophyll.
Ale, the Deschutes, which is a great pale ale. I don't even know if they make that anymore, do they?
I think so.
Do they?
Yeah.
But I've had the wet hop version of it, and it wasn't as good. And it because it is green
It's
and
tamed
vegetal
down
and,
too. Yeah.
and it tastes a little watered down.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an indication that it was something fun to play with, and there's a couple beers that pull it off right, but overall it's probably not worth screwing around with, and that'll get us some hate mail.
Whereas
Yeah, yeah,
concentrates,
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
other hand, will definitely take in the opposite direction and either become too much or using just the right amount. But I'd rather use a concentrate and instead of 10 pounds of a wet hop that
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So,
Right. All right, so let's get on to Chris's Bluebonnet beers because this is something I'm very interested to talk about. And when we talked about this last episode, was it?
Yes, it was last episode, but I
Mikey's
would
got them in a little holder.
Yeah, we talked about some of the
really like
Omega
this
yeast beers
little
that we
holder.
did and the results we got back from those. And what was really, I thought, really valuable
need
about
me on
that
camera.
discussion was the fact that there was some score sheets that we were initially upset with, and then when we went and tasted the beers, we realized that there was probably a reason that those score sheets came back the way they did. And so it's important to keep some perspective on, all the variables that go into play with a beer that's being judged by somebody. You don't know exactly what beer they were drinking on that day at that time for the most part. So Chris has brought in, or he sent us a couple of his score sheets for a couple of his beers, and then he brought some in here for us to taste, and we're going to kind of taste these and take a look at them and see what we think compared to the score sheets.
And the other side of it is these are score sheets from almost 2 months ago, probably.
That's true.
Month and a half.
Yeah.
So this beer is going to be a little bit different. It's going to change from when they were.
Yes,
they were
that's
trying it.
definitely true.
So-
Yeah.
Well, and I think that you guys out there might think that we're like beating a dead horse, but
We like to do that.
I think it's really important because I think what you've got to be able to do when you're brewing beer, and the whole reason that I think a lot of the reason that you enter your beer into homebrew competitions is so you can get valuable feedback on how you can make your beer better, right? And so
Yeah.
I think what you have to do though, however, and we talked about this last week a little bit, is that when you're drinking it, I think if you have some of the beer left over, I think it's a valuable tool to actually go back and really pour your beer and then read it with your score sheets and then kind of see maybe there is some of it that you taste and maybe clarify it a little bit for you. So I think these are always really good, valuable tools to use.
Well, and you always hear this notion, and we talk about this every time we talk about judging. I bring this up because I think it's an important perspective on it, is the idea of entering your beer into competitions to get feedback and to improve and change your beer. That only works if you know how to process the data that you're given back. Data is just data, and it's just like reading Yelp reviews or anything else. You have to realize how to do it. You can't just take it at face value for what it is, and you can't take a small sample size of that data and use it either. You've got to have several different score sheets back, not just
If you enter
two.
the same beer into multiple competitions and you get a consensus between multiple competitions that there is a perceived flaw or something of that nature, then that's good data. But if one person says they didn't like it, you can't judge it on that.
So is this the American wheat, Chris?
This is the American wheat.
Okay, so the two overall impressions that we got, and I know both of these judges. I know one of them is fairly well qualified, pretty well qualified, technically more qualified than I am, and one of them is a novice. And their basic criticism was that the color was too dark, it was too bitter, and then there was also a comment that the carbonation was too low. So right off the bat, if we're talking about color for an American wheat, I will agree that it's a little dark.
It is a little dark.
But at the same time, that's a very small deduction.
Right. I think carbonation is pretty much spot on.
What's up, Nigel?
When you look at appearance is supposed to be color, clarity, head retention, and then head characteristics. And all of those together are 3 points.
3 points.
So if the color is wrong, that's only 1 out of 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing I would knock this for. The head is a little bit low, but
also to be submitted, it was bottled from a keg, and then
well,
sat.
that doesn't matter. That doesn't
But,
matter. It still needs to be what it's going to be, no matter how you packaged it. So personally, the color thing, it's not way out of bounds. It's a little bit dark. It's like a copper, I would say, where it should be more of like a golden yellow. But the other thing is that extract, that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just say
I don't
this
know
was
if this is an extract
No.
beer. No,
This
but
was-
they don't know whether it's
they don't
extract.
know.
So it very well could have been. And so
I'll tell
at
you
the
all about
max,
how
I
this
would have
was
knocked you
made.
1 point on
Yeah.
appearance on this
I'll
max.
tell all about how this was made afterwards.
So as far as bitterness, I agree that the bitterness is too high.
Okay.
And I definitely would have dinged you on that. American wheat, the bitterness should be just there enough to balance the malt flavor and keep it from being sweet. That's one of the things that when you look at these score sheets that you don't see a lot. You'll hear comments like balance is off, which are vague. Where what you really should hear
balance
is
to malt,
balances to malt, balances to hops, and then
or balanced.
Right, and then how does that apply to that style? In this particular one, I do think that the bitterness is too high on it, and I actually get a bit of hop flavor too.
Well, and this is just me. I just get a really strong phenol that may be coming across.
Do you really?
Yeah, that may be coming across as bitterness.
What kind of phenol?
I get a little plastic.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
I don't pick up on that.
Yeah,
I get like a
little plastic
almost,
phenol.
almost cardboardy plastic.
Well, if you're talking about that may be just a sign of age.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think there's some age on this.
I definitely do think it's got a little tinge of age to it, and we qualified that at the beginning, which makes me think also when this was judged, it probably was a little bit more bitter actually than it is now. So I definitely do think the bitterness would have been the big knock for me on this beer. I actually think that this
You don't get any like clove spicy?
No, I don't.
Really?
No.
Okay.
And I'm
This
pretty
is one of my-
sensitive to phenols, not like you are.
Right.
This is one of my challenges of bringing beer to any of y'all because
I get it in the aroma.
half of y'all say it's absolutely this, and the other half of you go, I don't get any of that.
Well, that's
well,
the reality
that just
of
knows,
beer.
yeah,
I know.
and that's a really. And you talk to any individual here in this room. We know our limitations as judges, you know, and some things that some people can taste, other people can't. Some people can taste all of it. Some people can't taste any of it. So,
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there was a time that I was not in tune to oxidation, and I didn't really understand.
Right.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I realized that I don't really mind oxidation that much. Once I kind of started understanding it, then I decided I didn't like it. But you know, it's one of those things. It's kind of like you know, if you ever had, what is it, Rolling Rock? You know, it's just like it's just like green apple from hell. You know, and as a matter of fact,
I love Rolling Rock, dude.
Just to drink the snot out of that.
But me
Yeah.
too, dude.
But the thing is when you realize, I mean, when I think AB InBev bought them.
Yeah, I think
And when
they
they
did.
cleaned it up.
They cleaned it up. Everybody bitched because it didn't have the green apple flavor anymore, even though that's
Well,
a
see,
flaw.
back in the day when I drank a lot of Rolling Rock, I wouldn't have been able to pick that out at all.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about this that I will say on the judging sheets, that I think it's one of these things where one characteristic kind of jumps out and judges get fixated on it. And I know I'm guilty of it because sometimes when something jumps out at me, especially phenolics in particular, I have a hard time getting past that, and it's hard for me to taste
Yeah.
other things. The other side of judging this is that the fermentation is nice and clean on it, and that it has a nice wheat flavor to it. The body is nice. I think the carbonation's right on. I don't think the carbonation's low at all. And so it's a case where I think you got several things right, and there's a couple little things that just draw people off the path.
Was
on
this
it.
keg carbonated and then bottled?
Keg carbonated and then bottled.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
See, I feel like one thing about this too is like you're hitting that on like what he just said about everything as far as that goes. Because like right now it may not retain the head on it, but it's still got plenty of carbonation on the tongue, so that's what counts for a lot. But I feel like with American wheat beer, people are looking for something that's not necessarily they're limiting it down to something because it can be an aggressively hopped beer. It can have a lot more of that flavor character, I think, in that as far as where that goes, which I get a lot of fruitiness out of this. And I'm not talking about esters, I'm talking about like hop character.
Yeah,
More
I agree
than-
with you on that.
More than
yeah.
anything like a tropical note.
It approaches pale ale. Really.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's what like what is it? Okay, what's that? The one out of the Midwest. What's the Gumball Head? Isn't
Oh,
that
yeah.
like a standard American wheat?
I thought
Type
that
of-
was a German. I thought that had like.
No, it's like a IPA-ish almost. You
Is
know?
it really? Okay.
Yeah, but it's like
Must
I
been
don't
a
get a
long time
whole
since I had
lot
that.
of bitterness out of this, but I get enough that it stands out, and that's one thing that maybe if that were toned down some. But I feel like if people are dinging you possibly just for the hop character in this.
Yeah, what hops were you using?
This was all legacy hops. This was
Okay.
this
Oh,
beer.
okay, okay.
I didn't want to say that
That's-
outright because I know y'all's opinions on legacy hops.
That
See,
may
now
be
here-
a big
here-
part of it.
Here's the thing: did you enter this as American wheat, or did you enter this in the legacy hop category?
This was American wheat because this was originally supposed to be a wheat wine, and I had a problem with it on brew day, so I didn't get enough sugar out of it.
Okay, because I was going to say it doesn't seem like it's a high alcohol.
No, it's not.
No.
It only came
Yeah.
out to 4.5%, and
Uh-huh.
it was supposed to be 9.5%.
Boy, you did have a problem, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I had some problem on brew day that it just did not extract sugars.
So here's the thing about this: is you got a 21 and a 23. I think those are a little low. I think I probably would have went around 27, 28, because I think if you're talking about check boxes, this checks
Checks a lot of the
It
boxes.
checks in the
3
right
of 5,
spots.
Yeah.
3 of 5.
If
Probably.
his color would have been
Yeah.
bright and light, do you think that this score would have been higher despite if all the flavors
I
remain the
think
same?
that
but the
these
score-
judges would have scored it higher.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, the color wouldn't have been as much of an
I know,
issue.
but I feel like that's just something that immediately.
But I
happens.
think that they did ding
Yeah,
it a
put
lot
them in a
because of the
bag,
color.
a
Yeah,
little too much
yeah.
bitterness in the color, and they just totally, off the board.
Yeah.
To me, the color really matters to me when you're talking about a stout that's this color or a pilsner that's black. When it's completely out of
beer.
when it's completely out of style, a little too light, a little too dark. I usually comment on that, but it's really hard to knock
Maybe a
points.
point. Maybe
it's
a point.
really hard to
Yeah.
knock points,
Right.
because, like you said, there is carbonation. And I bet the head retention is just the fact that it's not bottle conditioned, because you've got
Yeah.
plenty of protein from the wheat to give it a head, but it's just not holding it probably because of the
Well, it's only a
the keg.
4.5% beer too.
True,
Yeah.
but it's,
So,
it's going keg
yeah.
to bottle instead of a keg or a bottle conditioning.
And pour
So
to pour.
here's the other thing, and this is
Sure.
one of the things we talk about brewing all grain, is that you're not brewing to a volume, you're brewing to a gravity. So when you realized that this beer was coming in way under gravity, did you adjust your hops?
I didn't.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's your issue. This is hopped for a 9%, and it's a 4.5%.
Yes.
That's
but it
the
was
thing.
also later edition hops. It was not. There was
Doesn't
no
matter.
bittering
Doesn't matter.
hop.
You're
Yeah,
you're,
it's
you're
still-
hopping
yeah.
it for a certain total IBU.
Yeah.
Once you realize your total sugar is going to be a lower amount, you have to adjust your hops. So that's one of those things that it's just a learning process in all grain brewing, in that you're not setting out with, okay, this is the recipe, this is what I'm using, and this is what I'm going to do. You are going to have to make adjustments on the fly in all grain brewing, whether it's adding water or boiling longer or changing the amount of hops you put in. That you have to remember that everything is a balance,
Yeah, it shifts
and when
everything
one
around.
part of it is different, the other part has to be different too. And I think that is where you probably got a little off on it, is just that it's bittered for a much stronger beer. So
And maybe that hop sucks so bad that I think it's.
I actually don't hate the hop. I had several beers with that I thought
Did you
were pretty
taste
good.
Nigel's?
Nigel's was.
I liked
it.
This was
Nigel's.
good.
Oh,
And
it
with
was.
this one, I'm getting like an apricot kind
Was
of
that,
thing.
was
That's
that his
I don't like
I don't
his
know.
hops.
I get like a freaking mulled wine spice.
Nigel was at
That's
third
one of the
place?
things I like about it, actually. Is that I don't like it as a bittering hop, but I like it as a late addition, a flavor, an aroma.
Yeah,
hop.
I like the flavor on it. Yeah.
I wouldn't.
They don't brew it.
now that
They don't even make it anymore.
Yeah, I
The
also
legacy.
noticed that. I would like to see them make it again, because I like it as a late edition hop only. I've tried it as 60, 40, 20, 0, and as a dry hop in the course of trying to make decent beers. with
Well,
this.
and here's something, man. I told the guys this year at Bluebonnet, I said, man, if you guys want to do a featured hop, I said, quit getting that shit from those guys.
Yeah,
man.
I agree
Stop
with
making
you on
the
that.
shit.
Man, that is garbage. I'll donate, however many pounds, 10,
Get something
12
off
pounds.
the beaten path. Do Motueka or something like
Yeah,
that.
but
That
at
people
but
aren't used to using, but
but
not
it-
just a garbage hop that nobody wants.
Well, and that's the problem. Most of these are 2 or 3 freaking years old,
Right.
man. They're
Yeah,
old
and
and
we-
gross, man.
We've
The
got
Belma? Come
yeah,
on,
we've got
Belma.
access. Stubby's got access to some hop
Flush a bunch of
growers that
Belma
he
down
can
the
get some
toilet.
unique stuff.
Yeah,
some
man.
German
like
stuff.
so.
and some,
So one of the things that we're coming out with, or they're coming out with, one of the growers that we work with is coming out with something called Zappa, which I heard that's going to be the next hot thing. It's kind of like it's a Neo Mexicana. It's kind of like the
It
Medusa.
tastes like yellow snow.
It's like Medusa. No.
Oh, the Zappa fans out there will get that. And everybody else thinks I'm a dick.
Well, you are.
Well, yeah.
But,
there's
yeah.
a strong argument to be made for that.
But anyway.
All right, let's move on to the next beer here, which is your wheat wine,
Yes.
which we've had
Yes.
before.
Isn't that what we just had?
No, this
is an American wheat.
Oh,
you had first was American wheat, which was a
Intended to be a
wheat
wine.
wine that didn't become a wheat wine.
Gotcha,
This
gotcha,
was
gotcha,
made
gotcha.
prior to that.
So
I'll tell you about wheat.
this is one where I think you had one usable score sheet and one completely useless score sheet.
This happens a lot.
During the if you're looking at your flavor notes and one line says it's chewy and the next line says it's thin and watery, you could just take that score sheet and throw it in the trash.
Or shove it up the judge's ass.
Yeah, well, I would pay
Well,
money
and
to see
you know
that.
the half points.
So your second score sheet, I think, was filled out really well. Gave you 25 on it, which is not bad. It's just not great. And his overall impression was this beer needs more wheat malt character. I'm getting malt sweetness, but it is more Pilsner type sweetness. There was no hop aroma and would like to have some. I'm not real familiar with wheat wine. Is wheat wine supposed to have hop character to it?
It is
Why don't-
supposed to be
why don't-
over half wheat.
I haven't.
Okay.
I've had a
Do we have the style guidelines for this one?
I can pull them up
had a
here.
bunch of different
Yeah,
versions.
pull
of
them up
this, and
because
they've all
I'd like to.
varied.
I'd like to.
What category is this?
22A, I think.
22A. Okay.
Because this is an interesting style. It's weird, man. So
And I've had some really good ones.
And I've had some really
Mike
terrible
Treadway and Sean Vreeland
22D.
make an absolutely outstanding wheat wine.
I'd say it's bready and doughy.
So let's see here.
Do you think
yeah, I really like this. I'm not sure it fits the style guidelines.
Overall impression is a richly textured, high alcohol sipping beer with a significant grainy, bready flavor and a sleek body. Emphasis is first on bready, weedy flavors with interesting complexity from malt, hops, fruity yeast character, and alcohol complexity.
This comes across like a wheat to me.
You know what
And
it
bready
reminds
dough.
me?
What's the ABV on this?
This one was 8.5.
You know what this one tastes to me? I mean, honest to God, this tastes like a Belgian beer to me.
It does.
Like
Very,
a Belgian
very.
like a Belgian pale. Or,
What yeast
or
did you use with this, Chris?
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah,
I
because man,
changed
it
phones, so I'm
it
not
truly
sure if I have it.
if you'd have told me this was a Belgian blonde or something like that, I would, or even a triple,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been like, yeah, no
With the
doubt.
fruity yeast character part
See,
of it.
here's the
Yeah.
thing that caught my eye about that, because that one score sheet that I did think was useful said there was not enough hop character. So in the flavor, it says moderate to moderately high weedy malt flavor, dominant in the flavor balance over any hop character. Low to moderate bready, toasty, caramel, or honey malt notes are welcome complexity note, although not required. Hop flavor is low to medium and can reflect any variety. So there's nothing in there that tells me that,
That it has to
that you
stand
should
out.
be looking for hop flavor in
Yeah,
this.
I don't think you want hop in this.
No,
beer
and
at
that's
all.
what kind of stood out to me about. So I'm surprised that person wrote that. Now I do agree. In fact, actually, I think I would say that there's a little too much hop flavor in this, because if they're going to say that it doesn't have enough wheat malt character to it, I don't think it's because there's too much Pilsner.
Right.
I think it's because there's too much hop flavor.
I mean, dude,
that
to
steps
me,
on
I mean, but if you handed this to me and asked me what style I thought it was,
I'd go Belgian.
Oh, absolutely, Belgian blonde.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it tastes like to me.
Yeah, and that's
or
what I
maybe
think.
even a saison.
Do you know what you've mashed at? Low, high.
To me, what throws this off is the yeast character.
153.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
that's,
the
just
only
it, though.
thing.
Comparison with this one, more than simply a wheat-based barley wine, many versions have very expressive fruity and hoppy notes, while others develop complexity through oak aging.
See,
Less
and this is
emphasis
what
on the hops in an American barley wine. Well, yeah,
This is what kills me about this, is there's a sentence in there, some varieties have more emphasis on hop flavors, and then judges read that and they go, this isn't hoppy enough.
Well,
Right.
and wouldn't you say this is really effervescent,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
like a quad, or like a triple or something?
But it
I
also has
think
that
if you
wheat
entered
kinda
this
character.
as a Belgian blonde, it would score in the high 30s.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think
Yeah.
I think it lacks body.
That's why
for-
I'm thinking Belgian
too
blonde.
much maybe
for a
flavor
wheat
for
for a wheat wine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it lacks.
I think you could even go Belgian pale.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it lacks the some of that weedy bready note.
The reason it lacks the weedy bready
the
note
hop.
is the yeast character.
Yeah.
I think this
Well,
tastes like it was brewed with a
Over-dominant.
Belgian, like the Ardennes yeast or something like
Yeah,
that.
it does.
Yeah.
Here's one thing I would say, and I think this is an important thing for you guys out there to realize. If you brew a beer and it doesn't necessarily fit the style guidelines, don't be married to that.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is because, I mean, after kind of going over the style guidelines on this particular beer, Chris, I understand why you didn't get good scores. However, if you would have brought this to us and said, hey, what should I enter this in? And we told you Belgian pale or Belgian blonde or something like that, I think it would have scored much higher score.
Mm-hmm.
So the point being there is that enter what you brewed. I mean, enter what you
Enter what you
it
ended
tastes
up
like.
with.
Enter what it came.
tastes
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
not what you brewed.
Yeah.
Because there's so many times, and I've done this 100 different times, when I make a beer and it's not necessarily exactly what I want it to be. What I can do is I'll go, okay, this really tastes good, but it doesn't fit the style guidelines. What style guideline does it fit?
Right.
And
And that's I think the biggest weakness of the vast majority of judges out there is when you are judging a beer, you should be able to say this would have been better
Right.
in this category. In fact,
Right.
when you take your BJCP exams, they specifically put at least one beer in there in your tasting exam that they expect you to do that.
Yeah.
They
And
expect
I mean,
they put something in the wrong category, and
Yeah.
they expect you to be able to call out this should have been in this other
Right.
category. And I don't know how many times I've ever seen that on a score sheet. It's a very, very few.
man, and I got to tell you, you know what this tastes like to me? The yeast character.
The
It ta-
shoof.
No, to me it tastes like freaking Belgian strong ale. I mean, it tastes just like the
1388.
I can guarantee
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
1388.
It tastes like a Belgian triple yeast.
Yeah,
like
you're right, it
the
does.
Westmalle
You're right.
strain.
I've used 1388 exactly once, and it was not in a beer.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
It
a-
was your mead, right?
it
That was
actually
in my
does
mead,
have a little
which
bit of
turned
the
out really well.
pepperiness to it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it
You're
does.
right.
It does. It just kind of tastes like a.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to find out what yeast you use on
I'll
this.
You
have
know-
to look in my brewing book
Yeah.
because, like I said, I had it saved on my other phone, and I just converted yesterday, and it's not there anymore.
What we were talking about, Stubby just mentioned it. I've done this a few times, and Nigel and I will sit down prior to competition, and we'll taste our beers together, and we think, okay, well, I was intending, style A, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it in there because I don't have anything else that was going in whatever that intended category is, but we bleed over,
Mhm.
So one beer can go in to 4 or 5 different categories just to kind of shotgun it around and see
Mhm.
it might perform better in another category. So
Yeah, dude. I even think he could go Belgian triple on this.
You almost could, yeah.
you could go pale, blonde,
It's not
triple.
dry enough for that, I don't think. But
Yeah, but
No, but you'd probably
it has
get
a lot of the
28.
has a
Yeah.
lot of the characteristics. Yeah.
You'd probably get slightly under 30 on a couple score sheets. You could get above 30 on a couple.
see, and this is one of the reasons the way I fill out score sheets, especially with styles that I'm not familiar with, is I don't ever read the style guideline before I fill out my score sheet. I taste the beer and I write down everything that I perceive, and then I go and I read the guideline.
That's exactly what I did.
And that's
When I
what
judge.
you should do when you are going to decide what category you're going to enter your beer in, because you need to be able to discern just what you perceive about it. And then when you compare that to the guidelines, if you start hitting a few of the same notes, then you know you're in the right
Right.
spot. If you don't, I don't care what you
Move along.
set out to brew. That's not what you brewed. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right, and I
Just
think
make sure you put
ultimate-
it in the right one.
I think ultimately that's the best point that I would like to make to you guys out there is just that. One of the most valuable tools that we used to do is we used to have a clinic before Bluebonnet, and we would come and have a bunch of people. We'd bring up James, he's a Grandmaster judge, and we'd actually talk about that because I think that's an important thing. It's not just I mean, there's many times I brewed a Southern English brown, but I entered it as a mild, and it scored better that way. I actually I would enter it in both, because you can do that, but it would always score better as a mild, and so there's different things that you can do, but I think that's a valuable thing, and that's one of the things that we harp on a lot, is to make sure that you actually get involved in a homebrew club where you can bounce ideas off of people. If you're just shooting blind, man, and these guys don't know what they're talking about, or you don't have any way of knowing how to improve your beer. I mean, we can sit here and talk to you all day long about how to improve your beer, but until people can actually taste it and evaluate it, you're never going to know what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
to piggyback on that, I'd say if you are interested in entering your beers into a competition and you've never done it before, I highly encourage you to try and go out and judge with other judges, at least in the first round, for a brewing competition, because I learned probably more in doing the 5 flights that I did for BBO than I probably would have in the year's worth of club meetings that I went to.
That's an excellent point, Chris, and that sums up the entire reason that I like judging, because personally I don't like competitions. I just don't. I don't like entering my beers in them. I think that the feedback you get is dubious at best, and that's not to say that bad beers win, because I don't think that's the case. I think that only good beers win.
Because that's not to say the best beer doesn't always win, but
whatever beer wins is an excellent beer. I do know that
it's qualified.
But it's a very flawed process, and it's something that I just have a hard time coming to terms with. The reason I like it is because I think it makes me a better brewer, and I think it makes me enjoy beer more.
Yeah,
to be able to dissect it and identify what it is I like and don't like,
and to approach
why,
and also to approach things that are not necessarily in your wheelhouse. If you've always been a porter stout kind of person and you judge a pale ale flight,
you'll learn a lot.
You learn a ton.
What I would say about that too is, like, for us, a lot of competitions happen in a larger city area of some kind. It's worth, if you don't live close to something, but it's not that far away, go ahead and get a hotel and just go and enjoy it. So honestly, it's worth your time. It's fun. They often provide food.
It is a really good
You're going to
time.
spend a day up there learning things, trying things you've never had, and finding out what's good and bad.
And
you will definitely find out what's bad.
And sitting across from somebody who has a different perspective on the same beer. So you're both sitting down and really picking apart every little piece of this beer with 2 different palates, with 2 different experiences.
And you may be finding something that you never could place exactly what that flavor was, and someone else knows it. Maybe there are 2 at the table go, that's exactly what that is. Now you know.
And I had that happen while I was judging too. I tasted something and I'm like, it's an herby flavor, but it's not not a green herb. It's a brown herb. It's a this and this, and it tastes like this food and this food and this food, but it doesn't taste like this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, it's that. It's right here on the side. It's actually DMS.
Well, and that's one of the things that you can and I think, really, I'll be real honest with you. I brewed beer for a long time before I got into that, and I'll be real honest with you. I thought it was good, but I didn't know any better. But I would say that when I started doing judging classes and I started judging beers and stuff like that, I got better at it. And I got to be honest with you now. I mean, the way, and this is not to sound this. I really don't want this to come across as being, you think I don't know how you would say it, but anyway, because
cool story, bro.
Yeah, I know, right? Blah, blah. I have Plodil for brains right now. Anyway, no, I'm just saying that one of the things that really has taught me what to look for, how to taste, and everything is people bringing their samples in all the time.
Yeah,
and I get to sample people's beers all day long and
I think that's even better than judging competitions.
It is, and a lot of the times, I hate to say this, but most of the time people bring us beer, it's not because it's good. It's because what's wrong with this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
They
what do we?
know something's
What?
wrong,
What?
but they can't identify it.
And you know, I've had guys coming in here for 6 or 7 years, and they've never brought me a beer, and then the one they screw up. Hey, Stubby, can you taste this one and see what's wrong with it? I'm like, come on, man. You've been brewing for 6, 7 years, and you bring me all, never bring me anything else, but you bring me the shit.
We had one guy come
but
What you fix?
yeah, because I'm a man.
It's a
I
fix.
feel like you're
We
maybe
fix it.
discouraging people from bringing you their beer.
No. We always
No, that's
fix
only
it.
guys I know that have been brewing for a long time, and they brew good beer. They don't bring me the good stuff. They just bring me the stuff that they
We
screwed
have
up.
a lot of people that do bring us their good stuff.
Well,
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Gynecologists don't get to see the healthy ones. You're,
All right, Brandon
Just
said
kind
enough
of talking
tonight.
about that earlier.
you're in that same category. I think.
Yeah.
The thing you love, you only get to see the worst versions of it.
But I gotta tell you that that really helped me really helped me learn and now I but that's what you've got to do is it's like putting a name with a face. You know what I mean? You've got to be able to. And it was so amazing to me when I tasted a beer the first time, and somebody sat down with me and they go, "Oh, this beer has oxidation," and I'm going, "Okay, wait a minute. I've tasted this flavor before." Oh, okay. You start and that's just not that one sample, but there's a little light bulb that goes off in your head, and you're kind of like, "Okay, I get it. That's maybe an off flavor that I've had before, but I didn't realize that was an off flavor."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're right.
You're starting to put 2 and 2 together. You're starting to understand, okay, because ultimately, even though you may not be able to taste the flaws or your palate hasn't been developed enough, and when I'm talking about your palate has not been developed enough, you may taste that beer and you go, it doesn't taste very good, but
Right.
you may not know why it doesn't.
That's
taste
exactly
very
right.
good.
It's not that you're not tasting it; it's that you can't individualize
know.
the flavors in it. Well, a good example of that for me are English hops, dirty hops.
Yeah,
When those get
they're hard.
into too high of a
Yeah.
concentration,
Yeah, it tastes like
there's a
dirt.
certain flavor characteristic that they take on that I was never able really to put my finger on until Nigel came in and we really started breaking down English beers and we started tasting homebrew versus commercial beers, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, that comes from
those hops.
too much Fuggles or
Right.
something
Right.
like that,
Yeah.
And the only way to do it is to taste and analyze and collaborate with people who
Oh,
have
yeah.
a little bit different palate than you and know certain flavors better than you do and
Yeah.
that kind of
It
thing.
could be too much. It could be too little. You may be
Right.
sensitive to something like phenols.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So the 5 or 6 of us sitting in here tasting a beer and talking about it is an infinite amount of education in terms of being able to pick out certain flavors and identify, oh, you're sensitive to this.
Right.
Oh, is this like the Oscars when they play people off
Hey,
the
and
stage?
we're-
I've been talking
and we're
too
back.
long. Actually, I think it probably is time for the break.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we've been an hour.
Yeah.
Over an hour, I think.
Yeah, just on
I
recent
think so.
We can come back. Yeah.
Anyway, when we come back, we're going to get to the thick of the subject.
That's right.
With
The
our
crux-
first,
the
we have a
crux of
listener
the biscuit,
question, and
right?
then we'll
the
get
crux
to
of
it.
the biscuit.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Anyhow,
The
we'll.
bad vaginers in the doctor's office.
Vanilla vaginas.
Oh my goodness! All right, guys, we'll be right back.
We'll be back.